So again, today's discussion is based on curiosity. Curiosity is a very central aspect of innovation. We have to be curious about the world, not just accept it for what it is, but we have to have a sense of wonder. Why is it that way? That's a little bit strange. What can I improve? How can I make it better, etc. So one way to do curiosity is to explore areas outside your interest. So that's why I said to just attend a webinar. You probably would not have attended a webinar necessarily. So attend a webinar and write a paragraph or so and present that to Dave for about 5 minutes. The order of people will be here. Can you see my screen? The order of people will start with Rita, Baikisheva, Marius, and so forth. So I will take off the share. And everybody understand? Any questions?
No.
No.
Okay, great. So now we're ready with Rita.
Professor, I have a question.
Yes.
Yeah, like, is there a penalty if someone exceeds the time?
No, it's okay, but try not to go too long. I mean, 20 minutes is not going to be good. If it's too long, I will just stop it.
Okay.
Okay. So, where's Rita?
Yes.
Rita, I'm going to make you a host.
Okay.
So now you can share the screen and you can start.
Is it appear?
Yeah.
Okay. Shall I start now?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello, today I'm going to present about my first project observation about the webinar that I have joined before. And the topic is new normal communication. So at first, I think the topic was not interesting at all because I thought that communication doesn't bring a big impact due to the pandemic. And turns out that the topic is so interesting because there is a lot of points that you can take note to. The first point is pandemic cause failure for some company due to disruptive communication, which there is a lot of business that use face-to-face communication, meetings, and the other stuff that need social interaction. But because the pandemic, some of business failed to adapt with the situation. And the second thing is people using internet with an average 8 hours a day, which means that even though the pandemic forced people to do social distancing and all the interaction things by online, there is an opportunity for keep up the business by using the power of internet. And for what I have learned about the webinar and the topic of the new normal communication is first, through pandemic, we should deal with find the bright side, creating value, giving more, be persistent, and stay innovative. And there's a quote that I take about this point, which many people think learns communication is not important, but the fact is the key of communication is about the engagement. And the second thing is create content to keep up this business. So I think by creating content, it means we can still keep up the business because we can attract people by our content and by the fact about most people using internet now much more than before because of the pandemic. And we just need to innovate the content to keep up the business. So thank you.
That's great. So turn off the sharing.
Okay.
Great. Thank you very much. So that was very important. Who gave the webinar?
Can I check it first? There are two people. That's like a organization about communication.
Okay, great. And how did you find the webinar?
Actually, I follow this organization in the Instagram, and they
Yeah.
make the webinar, so I joined it.
Very good. Okay. And you said initially you weren't that interested, but it sounds like actually a very important topic.
Because I think it's not important about the communication bring back impact to the pandemic, but yeah, it turns out that there's a lot of important things that I don't know.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, Rita. Great job. I will now go to Baiki Shiva. Okay. I got to figure out how to.
Yes.
Can you share the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to share the screen?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe. Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, no.
Great. Good job.
Wait, I cannot view, make it present. Oi. Hello, my dear classmates. I participated in a webinar in the sphere of psychology. It's called NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming. The neuro-linguistic programming, identifying what we really want. So the speaker was Mikhail Monkin. It was in Russian language, and I will try to explain it in English language. And he is psychotherapist and gestalt therapist. Firstly, I want to explain you what is it neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro means it is like our nervous system, neurological process, which create our experience of the world with the help of our senses, our body. And linguistic means it is the way we communicate with each other. It is not only the language. It includes our body, our facial expressions, mimics, and programming. It's the connection of how we perceive the world and how we interpret it to real life. And to actually understand what we really want, we have to understand the language of our mind. And the people, actually human, have two conditions. By marketing research, it is when people have the two conditions is satisfaction and dissatisfaction. By marketing research, marketers identify when they're giving a value to potential customers, and when potential customers are not satisfied with the values that they perceived, they get really they feel pain, they feel sad, and it is not really good. It leads to depression. And in the world now, it's 264 million people now struggling with depression. And not to be inside this number, we have to really try to recognize our needs, what we really want, because from our childhood we may get a lot of not really important traumas, and it may affect now to our conditions even without realizing it. But our mind is like such kind of complicated thing that is it is really hard to understand it. For example, sometimes we have social needs, we have physical needs, and sometimes we want to eat something, and at the same time we may want to get sleep, or we want to buy something new, but our wallet may not give a permission to do it. It is like our mind has different centers that make a decision for that responsible for every each our needs, like these parts in our brain is not all the time friends with each other. And such kind of things, for example, I want this, but at the same time I want this, and it will lead to such kind of thing like interpersonal conflict. We will lose to recognize what we want. It may become really difficult, and it will create confrontations. And not to be in such kind of condition, we have to truly we have to think. There are some, he was explaining different techniques. One of them is just dreaming, just thinking out of our even possibilities. It's even helpful. And techniques of free writing. We can write whatever comes to our mind. And for example, dream plus purpose, it is vision, because we have to analyze whole our life, from our childhood, our now this life, and even future. We have to think about such kind of things. And for example, sometimes there are such kind of goals, someone's goals, for example, and there are our goals. For example, someone's goal, it can be our teachers may give a homework, he gave a homework, and we have to do it, and it leads to procrastination. Like, we don't want to do it, or we feel under pressure. And but we will also times think about such kind of things, like we have to do it. But when it comes to our wishes, if we recognize it, we will do it. I want to do it. It will generate energy inside us. It will generate new power to move on. We will then feel alive. And
Is this the last slide?
yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and the most important thing, that when we are identifying our goals, it shouldn't be the only one goal. It should be several goals, and it all should be connected, interrelated to each other. And in such kind of way, we can build our whole life. So, thank you.
Thank you. So that was very good. Neuro-linguistic programming. Anybody have any questions?
How to?
So I have a question. I have two questions. So there's the neurological system, the linguistic system, and the programming means they influence each other.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think differently in Russian as compared to English? Do you feel like your brain is different?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Because there's a strong effect on the language and linguistics and how we experience the world. Actually, I'll tell you an interesting story. Turkish is my first language, but my native language is English, because I learned Turkish as a baby. So when I hear Turkish, it sort of puts my mind into more like childhood. So for example, if someone uses the word to run in Turkish, which is koşmak, I don't imagine running a program or running a machine or liquid running. I just imagine, you know, a person running. It's very simple. So my mind thinks differently. But anyway, I thought that was interesting. The other very important thing is, at the end you said making connections. And I told you about innovation is making connections. But it's also about, I think, mental stability. Because if you have too many ideas in too many different directions, it can be very stressful. So the connections is very important. So thank you very much. Good job. Let's go now to Marius Eckert. Thank you.
So,
okay, great.
so today I'm going to hold a webinar about my first project, which discusses my learnings from the webinar called The Behavioral Psychology of Recycling by Bush Systems. I don't know if you are aware of the following, but I was not. Um, I was not fully. And attitude is defined as thoughts and feelings towards someone or something, whereas behavior is the way in which we act in response to particular situations. And it's the result of our attitude. So this is how they both are distinguished. And the problem is that the attitude is not always directly translated into the respective behavior. So some of you might know that our attitude is tied to, as our attitude as students is tied to pursuing a good career and studying hard. But our behavior results in long party nights and hangovers sometimes. So it's not very consistent sometimes that our behavior results in our or from our attitude. So the trans-theoretical model is one tool that is used in the process to change individuals' behaviors. Therefore, it is important to know at which stage the individual is, and the different stages require different messages. The stages are also consecutive, which means that from one step to the next, it serves as guidance to reach a desired outcome. So the model in total has 5 stages, and I want to shortly explain them. So the pre-contemplation phase or stage is that the individual is not thinking of changing attitude or behavior, or it's not even understanding the subject. The next stage is contemplation. It means that the individual has no serious or consistent commitments or actions, followed by preparation, which means that the individual is beginning to make a plan and time frame when to execute, and the individual might need assistance for that. After that comes action. It means that the individual starts implementing the behavior and tries to continue it, and giving positive feedback and reinforce the behavioral change is one thing that the person should do that tries to change the behavior. The last stage is the maintenance, which is that there is a need to continue the behavior to avoid the backsliding. Backsliding refers to going back to one of the stages. So yeah, so now the as we know that motivation plays a big part in this process. I'm explaining the 2 types of motivation there are. So that's on the one hand intrinsic motivation, which means that a behavior is driven by internal rewards, self-satisfaction. It's like that a person is only doing the task for their own will. It means that the task itself is the reward. So some people might see learning as a reward. They do the task only for the reward of learning itself.
Mm-hmm.
And extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, means that an engagement in a task is only inspired by external factors, like, for example, money, grades, career, or praise. So some people that are going to pursue a career later and have a job might find themselves in the situation that they only have the extrinsic motivation to earn money instead of an intrinsic motivation of doing it for their own will. That's it.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mari. So what was so curious about this? What was so interesting about it? Or unusual?
For me, interesting was I'm hearing the words attitude and behavior a lot of times, but I was not really sure all the time that what attitude is. Sometimes I thought attitude is something like from some persons that are like that how they seem to be on the outside. But it was very interesting to get to know what attitude really is, and that behavior is a result of the attitude, and also, yeah, getting to know some more about the psychology behind behavior and attitude, and how to change that.
Very interesting. So I have a couple thoughts on this. One is in medicine, when we talk about emotional disorders, but Baikishieva was talking about depression. So depression is what we call mood disorder. And in medicine, you have two concepts. One is called the mood, and the other one is the affect. So the mood is how the person feels. The affect is how they behave or appear. So if you have a depressed mood, that means the person feels depressed. A depressed affect is, they're very slow, or they're crying, or whatever it may be that represents that. So if I say I have a depressed mood, but I'm smiling, well, he has a depressed mood, but a non-depressed affect. And so that's very interesting that you make that concept. The other interesting thing for me, because I'm curious, is you mentioned about internal motivation, external motivation. This is a question to the class. If you want to be innovative, which motivation do you think is better, internal or external?
Let's say internal.
Internal, right? You have to feel like you just want to be innovative. You just enjoy being innovative. Now, of course, that doesn't mean external motivation is bad. People say, well, if I'm innovative, I get more money. And, we talked about all those things, and maybe people will like me because they like innovative people or whatever. But I think fundamentally this internal motivation is very important. Okay, thank you. Next is Gunawan. Curiosity, great, thank you.
Okay. Good evening, Professor and my fellow classmates. For today, I will be talking about the first project, Curiosity. So for this project, so I attended a webinar called Sharp Minds, Pioneer Women in Space Science. Well, I am not really interested in space science, but I attended this webinar because I was intrigued when I see the title that actually in space science there were women as a pioneer in it. And actually this webinar was organized by Fleet Science Center, and the speaker is Gideon Marcus. He talked about women that are meritorious in space science, from Henrietta Leavitt to Mary Jackson. And the first piece of information I find interesting is that NASA was originally called NACA, and it changed its name from National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics to National Aeronautics and Space Administration. And then the second information I found was that in the beginning, most programmers were women. I mean, women are more familiar in the field of programming for space. And then, but in the 80s, advertisements are made to make boys more interested to become programmers. That's why nowadays we are more familiar with men in the programming field. And the most impressive part I found in that webinar is that the success from the women itself. Here is some example. The first one is Henrietta Leavitt. She managed to make the connection of how fast up the pulse of a star into how bright that star is. And then the second one is Dorothy Vaughan. Actually, she learned how to program computers and machines by herself, because at first she learned it to keep her job, because NACA was going to replace human resource into machines so that the work is more efficient. So she, want it or not, she have to learn to program. And then the third one is Laura van der Waal. She's the reason why now humans can survive in the space. She did an experiment of how human living beings can have a heartbeat in the space and still can breathe in the space. And then this last one is Mary Jackson. What is interesting is that she was not an engineer in the first place. She was a math teacher, but then she was given the opportunity to work with Zarnecki on the supersonic pressure tunnel, and then Zarnecki feel like she actually have the talent to be in this field, so he encouraged her to be to take a training to be an engineer. And from this, I find that actually innovation itself can come from interest and passion and the willingness to learn itself. And the last information I found is that the inequality, actually, it's not hard to imagine that there was inequality in old times. But what amazes me is that these women can fight the prejudice and bias they were given in order to make new knowledge become available to the world. And then what more than that, what interests me is that how can they get the insight to make developments and improvement in space science when they might not be able to get full access to facilities and earlier knowledge that they might need to make those developments. So
Great.
that's it.
Thank you very much. Good job. Anybody have questions? So I have an observation from my own experience. So you mentioned about the barriers, not the full access to facilities, right? So in 1979, I got very fascinated with computers. And I actually got very interested in programming. I think by that time, more boys were going into programming. It wasn't very common, of course, but I think in the 50s, it was a lot of women, and to some extent in the 60s. And there's a whole historical reasons for that. But that is true. But anyway, so I got very interested in computers, and I wanted to buy a computer. Of course, I didn't have money. That meant I had to ask my parents to get a computer. And they were very expensive. Even the personal computers were very expensive. So they did not get a computer. So I was very sad. I did not have full access to facilities, as it were. So I said, well, if I want to have a computer, because I was very interested in the computers and all that, I have to simulate a computer on another computer. And of course, that means I need a computer to simulate a computer. So you might think I'm, getting really stupid. I can't get the first computer. What am I thinking? I want to get another computer. So, but what I thought is, if I could use a computer at IBM, I could work on that computer to simulate the computer that I dream about. So I wrote to Frank Carey. You don't know the name, but Frank Carey was the CEO of IBM. And I wrote to him, I said, I have an idea to simulate a computer, and if I could just go to your offices, not his office, but one of the offices, and use a computer, I'd do my high school project. So he said yes, the CEO of IBM. And so every Friday, I used to go to this IBM office in Midtown Manhattan in New York City. And to make a long story short, 3 years later, I submitted that to the Westinghouse Science Talent Search, which is a very prestigious science competition in the United States. And I got to third place. And that was a very big deal. But it all started with limited facilities. And I think everybody has some limited facilities. And it can be either a source of depression, or it can be a source to innovate, to come up with a new solution. And in fact, what's very fascinating is perhaps one reason why the women were very good programmers is, especially in the early days of programming, everything had to be done. And I'm old style. I used to program with punch cards at some point. Can you believe that? But in the very early days, you had computers, a big mainframe, not a mainframe, but like a mini computer with 16 kilobytes of memory. And you had to program under extreme limitations. You couldn't be wasteful at all. It was just a very different mindset. So maybe that's why they were so effective. But thanks for sharing that. Good job. Next one is Inzu Aitsanova. Inzu Aitsanova. Okay,
hello everyone.
great.
Yeah, so today I'm going to talk about Curiosity, the webinar which I visited. So the webinar which I visited was about overcoming my fears in public speaking. So this webinar, according to the speaker, will help technical managers and the scientists to effectively overcome the fear and the stress associated with public speaking. So the speaker is, Rick Parmalee, the founder of Polish It and Professional LLC, a training company that specializes in improving communication groups, such as individual scientists and managers or group of trainers. So, Rick Parmalee talks about the main reasons for the fear of the scene and shares the exercises on how to overcome it. So there are several main reasons for the fear of the thing, and according to Rick Parmalee, the first reason is the fear of not being liked by the public. So that is the ability to please others is a vital resource. When colleagues like me at work, it's easy for me to find a common language with them, and easy to do business with business partners and so on. But during public speaking, this very attitude becomes a stumbling block, because people are different and you cannot like everyone at the same time. So the psychological mechanism is activated if the brain doesn't know what to do and cannot solve the problems. And the second reason is that fear is contagious. So when we grow up and communicate with different people, we consciously or unconsciously absorb the attitudes that we have tracked by more successful colleagues. And since most are afraid to speak, fear becomes contagious. So we are afraid to speak when we see that everyone is afraid of it. So the interesting was that exercises that he shares to overcome fear. So like this is a so the first exercises which he shares what was that taping the whole body with his hands from neck to legs. So this is due to the fact that up to 90% of a person consists of water. So taping gives impulses similar to those when we throw a pebble into a pond. So this exercise allows the muscles to relax. And the next and probably the most interesting moment of the webinar was that was the advice from the FBI agent trainer, and he shared some exercises and tricks in the fight to overcome fear. So it's based on the protective mechanism inherent in us by nature. So the brain displaces negative memories. So over time, we forget unpleasant stories, forget like quarrels with former partners, and so on. So, so like here, you need to close your eyes and visually imagine the switch like an iron box with a handle. So we must have an association of fear with this switch. So you can like even imagine that the word like maybe word fear is written on this metal box. And also it's turned on, the handle is at the top, and we begin by the power of thought to move this handle down. So to fix it effect, you can like even imagine a click when the handle is already on the off icon. So it's very important to move this handle mentally, not physically, so with your hand. So this perform this technique when the fear is active and manifests itself. For example, trembling in the body, like nervousness, and so on. So usually a panic condition occurs between 15 minutes before the speech. So at this point, you can already start doing. After the exercise, fear is off, and you can safely go to speak to public. So gradually this exercise displays fear in general, and he works with many phobias. I know that the fear of speaking firsthand, and for me it was a like source of stress. So this webinar was very interesting and useful for me. So that's one.
Very good. Thank you very much. Good job. So actually, I have some comments. I don't know if you noticed, perhaps, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but I have in public speaking absolutely no fear.
Okay.
And I'm not criticizing, I'm just saying this is my experience. So I was very curious about your presentation because I always wondered myself, why do I have no fear? I am absolutely comfortable I've spoken in front of 5 people. I've spoken in front of CEOs. I've spoken in front of thousands of people. I have no fear. It's weird. But I have my own answers. I don't do exercises like this. One is I get a lot of experience. So my advice to you, actually, and I'm not, criticizing these exercises, but I think more fundamentally, the best way to overcome the fear is to just do it, is to practice a lot. Every time you have an opportunity to give public speaking, just do it. You get into a cycle if you're avoiding it, and maybe I'll be nervous, maybe I'll do, then the next time they're inviting you or the opportunity. So I try to do as much public speaking as possible. Now it's not a problem or anything like that, but when I was younger, I always was trying to do that. So practice, experience is very critical. Now, the second thing that I do, which is a little bit like an exercise, but it's actually quite practical. The second thing I do before public speaking, especially if it's a stage, is I always check all the technical things. I test the microphone. I ask the people, where am I going to stand? I go up there and stand there and just look around. Maybe no one's in the audience. It's 15 minutes before, right? Or maybe some people are there. I ask, where is the screen? How's the air conditioning? I do all that preparation every time. So it's interesting. I have no fear, but at the same time, I'm not like relaxed and, you know, I'm very careful about it. So when I asked all of you, did you test your microphone? Did you test your video? That was expressing my process of preparation. So right now, everyone's doing very well because we're not going into this, oh, I'm sorry, my camera, you know, and I'm no nervous and the microphone fell down. Oh, you know, we're not dealing with that stuff, right? So that's very important. So practice and that kind of preparation is my techniques. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is Mao Wensheng.
Yes, Professor, you can hear me?
A little bit louder.
Okay. You can see?
Try to speak louder and into your microphone.
So this sound is okay?
Little bit louder.
Okay. So,
And actually, that's something very important in public speaking. Everyone is different, of course, but you might notice that I'm projecting my voice. You know, it's a different type of voice than just having a conversation. So Mao, you strike me as quiet, and you know that's not bad or good, but it could be a problem when you're public speaking. So try to project your voice out.
okay. So for today's presentation, I attend a webinar on whether Alibaba should invest more in e-commerce in Southeast Asia. And actually, when the first time I saw this topic, I think it's very boring because you know, as the e-commerce genre Alibaba, I think it will be very easy to invest underdeveloped area. But the fact is different from my idea. The professor said at the beginning, the Alibaba met the failure investing in underdeveloped area in the first place rather than easily, because the Alibaba did not meet the local feeling, because like for example, have a Vietnamese company from Alibaba, but the CEO from the China, they go to the Vietnam, the people cannot speak Vietnamese and English, so he must communicate with the local partners in Chinese, so it's difficult to communicate. So like this kind of things make the Alibaba met the failure at the beginning. But a professor said how to treat this problem for the many small companies in Southeast Asia. Alibaba can teach them experience and technologies, and let local summer businesses and farmers join the Alibaba's Southeast Asia e-commerce companies and so on. Like do these things, Alibaba can be successful easily. So I think what did he say is very reasonable, and it's something I did not think of. So I think I have learned a little about how to combine it with a local situation to develop the company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mao Wensheng. So I heard you very well. Thank you. I think this globalization concept is very important. And it's very interesting that you mentioned about language and cultural aspects and so forth. So I think this is very important for your businesses, for your future, and also for startups. And you know, one reason why it's good to be at SoulBridge is you have that kind of multicultural exposure. So thank you very much, Mao Wensheng. Next up is Mukhad. Ahmed San Mukhadiev. Sorry about that. Ahmed San.
Yes. Hello, everybody. Today, my project is about the programming because it was interesting area for me before. Now I'm studying finance. It doesn't work properly, sorry. This is the agenda. The first one is about what is the programming. What do you need in order to be a programmer? And the last one is programming difficult. Programming is a cool thing. It was his answer because of the webinar. He was explaining that programming can be a means of earning, a hobby, and in the end, this is the art. And that the formal meaning of the programming is the process of writing programs in a programming language. A program is a sequence of commands. And the next question is about the difficulty. Is programming difficult? He said that it is not at all. The main thing is to have a desire and motivation, and then you will overcome all difficulties. It is the old saying in Russian, probably, hard to learn, easy in battle. And at the beginning of the course, there will be many errors in your code that will not be so easy to fix. But then it will become clear that the errors in most cases are the same, and there will be less of them. And in addition, in studies, it is important to understand why this or that task needs to be done. And the next one is about what do you need in order to be a programmer? First of all you need is a desire. However, it's necessary in any business. It is also important to have a patience. Programming is a painstaking task from the beginning of writing the program to the result. It may take a lot of time, most of which will be occupied by the search and the correction of the errors and the mistakes. And the interesting thing about the mathematics, have you heard that mathematics is important for the programming? Yes, mathematics develops the logical thinking, which is extremely important, and it would be right to talk about it, but it's not necessary for the programming. Thank you.
Great. Thanks a lot, Ahmed San. That was very good. So you said you were interested in programming.
Yeah, I was.
And so this
in high school.
Yeah. So from this webinar, did you find anything unusual? Even though you were interested in programming, did you find anything unusual that you did not expect?
Unusual. He says that it is easy, but I thought that it is very complicated when I was 18 or 17.
Yes, right.
When I was interested in this field. But he said that it is very interesting and easy. You just keep practicing this one.
Well, thank you very much. Let's go to the next one. Nam Mai.
Yes, Professor.
Nam Mai Phuong.
Yes, I'm sorry. Okay, so hi everyone. So I accidentally scrolled my Facebook, and then I saw this one when be in the day before, and then I attend for this small in the success in the small piece, and this was founded by the female leads. This organization is support the curious to support the female about and to support and inspire the female to be the leader in the workplace. And then I curious because why this organized only focus on female? Is there any discrimination between male and female? And then I attend to this webinar, and then in there they have three. In here they have three speakers, and they have a different discrimination in type. One is the YouTubers, one is CEO, and one who is the founder for the volunteer club. And because that's all I curious about, that's all I will find out some information. And here's from the International Organization Labor. They have a paper right about Vietnam. In here you can see that the woman in Vietnam, the first picture who's a work in the field, second who work in the German factory is one of the women, and they have a research. They have been the organizer have been research and found out that the women in Vietnam particularly have affected by the disadvantage because the gender discrimination. And then one more thing is that the average salary in Vietnam of the male were higher 17% than the female, according to Salary Explorer in 2020. So it's really close. It's like right now. And then I was like, why that happened? Is it any special reason for that? And I found out this is because the future lifestyle. So the future lifestyle, when maybe you don't know, or maybe you know that Vietnam have been dominated by China for I think more than 1,000 years, and we were affected by the Confucian lifestyle of Chinese. And in this lifestyle, the woman didn't have a right, didn't have a power to do anything. For example, in the past, the woman had to stay at home, take care of the kids. They cannot persuade that dream. They have to be at home. They have to be take care of the woman, of her husband, and also she cannot choose the person she want to be married. If the parents say she married this one, she have to be married that person. So that is the reason why I found out that I have learned so much about history, and also I have been more deeply researched that even recently in Vietnam, people have the mindset. I mean, like, do people still have that mindset in our mind? And I have been asking some people, and I think the percentage is all different from the rural areas and the city areas. So as I live in the capital city, I have been educated, but the people who is in the cities, in the countryside, they have this. They right now they are still have a lot of female who are married at age 18. So when you married at the age 18, you haven't educated, you haven't had opportunity to know about the world and to know that you can have more opportunity if you go to college. And when you didn't have educated, so you don't know that you have a right to do something. So that is what I have learned so far from this webinars and from what I have been researching. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Okay. We're going to take a, thank you very much. That was great. We're going to take a break. And then we have 6 more people. It's 8:05. We'll take a break until 8:15. I will pause the recording. Okay, 1 second. So it's amazing what you can learn. Just trying to organize things. Actually, I forgot to start the recording. So it's amazing what you can learn from doing something that you're absolutely not interested in. I wouldn't be interested in stones, spirituality stones. I mean, it just seems a little weird to me, and it's not kind of my thing. But if you can observe and you're curious and observe out of that, you know, interesting things, how psychology works. Becky Shiva was talking about that, and you know how group think works. Then you can say, well, Katie has a business and she wants to sell something to a lot of people that it's new and they don't think it works, and they don't believe it. Well, if she goes to these sessions, she can maybe understand psychology and how she may use this information not to sell spirituality stones, but to sell some other new product that you know is difficult because of resistance and prejudice or whatever. So that I thought was very fascinating. And when I was younger, and still, I often try to do some things that I don't have any interest in, just to keep a little bit fresh and learn things. So I learned something from that. So that's really very good. Thank you, Katie. Next one is Putri.
Yes. Okay.
Great.
Okay. Okay. Can you see the presentation?
Yes,
Yes.
perfect.
Okay. So like what Katie have said before, it's so hard for me to find um and not interested things for me to join in a webinar or something. But after all, I ended up with stock industry since from the first time when it comes to stocks, it always been confusing and it's just not interested for me to turning myself on into the stock industry. So I think it's my time for take some curiosity and deep gain more from stock industry. Wait. Okay. This is the reason why I turning myself into the stock industry. First of all, I heard a lot of friends of mine already turning they into stock industry, and they said it's a new way to earn profit or earn pocket money by ourselves before getting a real job. Because since this day in this era, we as a teenager were provided by a lot of ways to earn money for ourselves. That easy, and it's there's a lot of way, not only turning it into stock life. And the important things is gain more experience, new experience by like what I said before. At first, I always think that stock industry is always a complicated things, and it's just a whole new level, and it can be done by a young age people like me. But since a lot of friends of mine who has the same age as mine, and they gain a new experience, they gain a lot of profit and are earning pocket money by themselves in this age before getting like a real job. It's generate my motivation to give it a chance to turning myself into stock industry. Maybe, but not today, maybe someday. And what can I learn from this webinar is first, from trading stock, timing is the important things. Like when the companies start to open the market, we have to wait like the first 3 minutes for them to see who's the buyer entering the market, and so on. So timing is the important things. And after that, we have to set our start and stop point. Like that's a point to feasible to gain profit in stock life, and know your limit. And how can we set the start and stop point is by setting a risk value. And what is risk value? Risk value is actually a value that you set to avoid gaining loss. And being consistent with the risk value of yourself is the key of trading stock. And this is the quote that you've been telling us in the past lectures, Ancora Imparo, yet I'm learning. So I'm still learning about new stuff, and this has encouraged me to to giving me a new experience and new stuff to do in the next life of mine. Thank you.
Yeah, mic,
Sorry,
Professor.
sir, your mic is not on.
So thank you. So thank you very much, Putri. That was great. I actually had very little interest in investing in stocks. And part of my personal philosophy was I wanted to invest in my own development. So I need to learn a little bit more about stocks. Obviously, I know some general principles, but thanks for sharing that. Okay, next up is Bae So-hyun. Bae So-hyun. Oh, very interesting.
So today I want to share the webinar I took, and it's called How Architecture and Interior Design Reduce the Risk of COVID-19. So these days, because of the coronavirus, many office workers started working at home. Also, like students couldn't go to school and spend most of the time at home. So I decided to take this webinar so that I thought about how I could improve my quality of life and protect my house from viruses through interior design and architecture.
Interesting.
So we all know that life after COVID-19 outbreak will never be the same as before. And who knows that we will have a pandemic like this next time. So we have to prepare for it. So most of the infections begin with the hands. In order to prevent is to put touchless appliances is very important, such as voice-activated elevators or hands-free light switches and automatic doors and cell phone controls and etc. And next is indoor lives with positive effects. As I mentioned before, these days, many people are kind of depressed and stressed because they spend most of the time at their home. However, lighting, colors, and materials, and configuration and scale and proportion controls people's mood.
So-hyun, can
Yes.
you go to the previous slide?
Oh, yeah. This one.
Yeah. I'm going to do a screenshot. Okay, thank you.
And it's one important factor to consider which connects architecture with interior design is that natural and free resources such as the sun and the wind can make environments much healthier by using passive energy. Ventilation, clean air, and direct sunlight, all factors that make our lives much healthier and our environments more hygienic to live and work in. And the last slide is that I actually did not know about the antimicrobial protection exists. So that this antimicrobial protection can kill microorganisms or stop their growth. You can find viruses, molds, and bacteria on countertops, flooring, on textile fixtures, but there are materials that offer antimicrobial protection against these problems. And they are available to use in your homes, offices, restaurants, hotels, and healthcare centers in order to provide the interior on the structure with effective antimicrobial protection. Hygienic coating for internal walls and floors must provide a surface that is easy to clean.
Great.
Thank you, Professor.
Can you actually go 2 slides before?
This one?
Yeah, this one. I'm just going to do a screenshot and okay, so I'll tell you what I did. So you presented on the touchless appliances.
Yes.
And you know I work with a digital healthcare voice recognition company. It's one of my jobs. So I took a screenshot, and he knows this, but I just sent it. So that will get some discussion going on voice recognition for elderly people related to touchless things. Then this slide I copied and sent to another friend of mine who works for a world leading ventilation company. And we were talking about some devices, but I like the aspect of the sun and everything. So I'm going to talk with him about that. And then the third one was about the antimicrobial surfaces. Another friend of mine, a company I'm working with that creates laser pattern surfaces that can prevent microbial. So again, your slide was very simple, but I wanted to reinforce that concept. So out of that presentation, I'm thinking of 3 possible innovations to, move forward. And then innovation involves working with others, not just me. So I quickly sent out those messages. That's innovation in action. Okay, thank you very much. Good job. Next is Sheng Zhu. 2 more people. Sheng Zhu.
Yes, I'm here, Professor. Can you hear me?
Yes, very good.
It's okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So hello everyone, my name is Shen Xifu. Today's my topic is human happiness. Last week, I had a meeting with my classmates in junior high school. Because I haven't seen them for a long time, we talk about a lot of things in junior high school. We generally feel that the life in junior high school was happier than now. Even if our parents didn't give us a lot of pocket money in junior high school, and we didn't have smartphones and computers. So when I got home, I took part in a webinar about why people's happiness is declining year by year. So in discussion, 80% of people think that they are not as happy as before. With the development of science and technology, people's living conditions has been greatly improved. Let me take China as an example. 30 years ago, it's very difficult for Chinese people to have enough food every day. But now most Chinese people have their own cars and house. However, most Chinese people feel there are a lot of pressure in their life right now. So I did some research. I think the main reason is that people are under increasing mental pressure. In the past, people's life goal was very simple. There's to eat better food and wear better clothes. But now people believe in the principle of money first, coupled with the influence of internet and some social medias. People's desire is growing. Our mobile phones and computers push us advertisements and entertainment news all the time. The purpose of this information is that people like to overdraw their money in advance to travel, to enjoy. So many people have began to have housing loans, car loans, and which led to their pressure. So all in all, I learned that too much desire is one of the reasons for the declining of human happiness. So I think people should realize their ability, not consuming advice, and should not be guided by the wrong information, and should be earnest and step by step. And this is my presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. So this was not a webinar. Well, it was a webinar, but it was more like a social gathering online. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
It's like a
so group thing, yeah. But it wasn't like an official webinar or something. I'm not criticizing. That's okay. So it was a webinar, like one speaker talking about a topic, or was it more like a group discussion?
Yes, I attended a webinar in a Chinese social media called WeChat. Like many people talk about things.
Yeah, so that's actually what I'm not criticizing, I'm just trying to understand. What I meant by webinar is like you have a speaker, they announce the speaker, like a seminar. And the speaker speaks, and then they have some discussion, like a research seminar, like a lecture. But what you described is more like a reunion where people were getting together, chat room like. Is that correct? Like, who was the main speaker? There was no main speaker. It was just your high school classmates.
Yeah. No, I attend. It's okay.
Yeah, I know you attended. So, but that's interesting. I'm not criticizing, because I think innovation is always about doing something differently. Everybody chose like a webinar, but you interpreted that as a kind of a group discussion, which is fine. That's different. No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have one more person, Yata, but then I forgot to do recording. So I want Katie Peterson to go again, but very quickly, just like 1-2 minutes. Okay. So let's go with Yata and then finish with Katie Peterson.
Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Annette. I hope you can hear me well. I'm going to present also about curiosity, specifically on online marketing. And here is the table of my content. I will give you the definitions of the keywords, the area of my interest, the questions that I was so curious about, the solutions, and I'll conclude. By definition, curiosity, as we learned in class, is a strong desire to know or learn something, and especially if that thing is rare, new, or something strange, or anything at all. And online marketing, as we all know, we are in a business school, is advertising goods or services to customer via digital platform or strategy. So why am I so curious about online marketing? For instance, as we are living in a world whereby technology has increased so much, and it has developed to an extent where it has changed people's interests, people's preferences, and people's ways of doing things. Most of the people these days take most of their times on social media, and almost everything is done on social media. And for that reason, there are lots of businesses that people do online these days. Like millions of businesses are done online, and also a lot of business owners market their products online. And the area of my curiosity is specifically on like people advertise same products. Like sometimes maybe their businesses are the same, their products are the same, and they even have the same ideas. And like my question here comes, like, how come that some people have more customers than others? That is where I'm curious about that area of my interest. And for that reason, like, because customers, because of a lot of businesses online with the assigned same products or same ideas, there's a lot of rivalry or high competition for customers. So for now, these are my questions. How do online business owners or marketers manage to gain the attention of many customers or viewers to their businesses? What is the secret behind their success? That is where I'm curious about. And also another question can be, what do they do, or what do they use, or how creative are they, and what makes them different from others? So I was talking, even before I watched this webinar, or even before the professor gave us this question to go and look for the area of our interest. I was always curious about this, and here I found the answers for my questions, or for my curiosity, in that webinar that I attended. One of it is that the successful people normally, they are never giving up people. They don't give up. Like, if you want to be successful, if you start a business, don't give up. I always have that tendency of, when I begin something and it's not generating anything, I start losing an interest, and I just give it up. But for somebody successful, you have to be very patient, and you have to strive for what you want. And even if you do something that it might not even make sense from the beginning, you shouldn't give up. And the other thing also, stop waiting for golden opportunity or golden time. There is no perfect time. If you are curious of something, know about it and do it. Start it if possible. Don't wait for golden opportunity, because there is no perfect time. And the other thing also, be creative. Like, make creativity part of your daily routine. If you're doing your business, be creative. Let your customers every time find something new. And by doing that, you can attract more customers to your business actually. And also, put your customer's voice at the center of your marketing. Every time when you do something, you should always be able to be very keen on what your customers want, so that you can be able to pick their interest. But if you ignore them, remember, the customer is your king for your business. And also, the other thing also is that you don't underestimate any idea, however small it might seem. You shouldn't underestimate any idea. If you have any idea, you should put it into practice and don't underestimate it. And I related this to what we learned in class, where Professor said the great innovations that we see these days are discovered accidentally. So your small idea that you might have gotten, if you ignore it, maybe that is the area where you're going to be successful in it. So you shouldn't underestimate it. And there is something I just wanted to read about this from Steve Jobs, that I'm convinced that about half of what separates the successful entrepreneur from the non-successful entrepreneur is perseverance. So always remember to persevere and be patient in everything. And in my conclusion, here is my conclusion: curiosity is the compass that leads us to our passions. Follow it and you won't be disappointed. The future belongs to the curious. So we should always be curious to know something and to learn something and put it into practice. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. So now you know why I chose this as the first assignment. Curiosity. If you're not curious, then you can forget about it. As the New Yorkers say, forget about it. So thank you very much, Annette. Let's go, because I forgot to start the recording very quickly, just so we have it on the record, Katie Peterson, and then we're done for today.
Okay, so my presentation was about spirituality stones, and why I chose this topic, like others said, was because I'm really interested in a lot of things, and it was kind of hard to find something that I'm not interested in. So I landed on this one, and it turned out to be interesting in the end. So the webinar was about spirituality stones, about the different types there are, their different powers, what they help with, and how to use them. But that was like a first part to the whole seminar, and then the second part was like a group discussion where the host tried to help the people who had attended with their problems and try to suggest the stones that would help with their particular problems. And what I found interesting about the whole webinar was not the topic itself, but more like what the topic or how the people reacted to the whole webinar and to the host. And first, I like that everybody in the webinar was really immersed in it. They were really active, trying to ask a lot of questions. And unlike at school, like people don't really attend with full attention. But there, people were really interested in the stones and wanted to know everything about it, and took everything the host said as pure gold and as like pure truth too. The second was I felt kind of pressure to agree, because when everybody around you says something and says that this is like, this happened to me, and everybody like nods their heads and is like, yes, like I have been feeling the same thing, you kind of start feeling like you should agree, and you should say like, oh yeah, maybe I have felt something too, and try to start thinking of instances where you could have felt something similar. And what I also liked was that it was more like a psychology session. So even though I have never held the stones in my own hand, I don't really know if, you know, what they do or if they work, but the whole meaning behind the stones, I think, is more psychological, so that when the teacher tells you what the stone should do and how to reflect it on your own life and on your own problems, when you take the stone home and start thinking about it, and every time you maybe see the stone, you start thinking about your problems again, it kind of might work like that. And also the host gave out some other tips other than just only the stones, just talk through their problems and stuff. So I think it's also like a psychology session. And then I also felt a bit of false hope, I guess, because if there's such like simple solutions as buying a $10 stone to your like huge problems, then it felt like being in a dream. You know, you spend a couple of $100s and then all of your problems are gone. So but you know, that's the extreme thought, but kind of it was comforting, I guess, that there's hope for even in hopeless situations. And yeah, and the COVID came up a lot, which was also interesting. So I think people have been feeling the isolation effects a lot. So I guess this webinar even helped people with the current situation. And yeah, thank you for listening.
Well, great. Thank you very much. We're going to close very shortly. I just wanted to make one comment that just came to my mind because it's very curious. Groupthink. Everybody knows about groupthink. It can lead to very good things. It can lead to very bad things. You know, people in a group and they go wild, and they beat up other people or whatever. I'm not going to go into the whole situation, but we see examples of normal people becoming really strange thinking as a result of group thinking. And of course, it could be good things as well. But what was strange about what you said is that the groupthink seems to have arisen in an online environment. My thought was groupthink should be people in the room together, in the stadium, cheering for a team or whatever, but even online. So that actually raises some interesting points that how does that work? This could be like a whole research project. It could be related to marketing, like Annette was talking about, and so forth. So this is very interesting to me because I'm very interested in how, as you know, I'm somebody who likes to innovate, so I don't like groupthink. I think it's generally not a good thing. Like in politics, American politics, I don't regard myself as Democrat or Republican because I don't believe in just doing a groupthink. I'm my own person. Maybe that's has its own problems, but anyway, that's just my feeling. So I'm always very sensitive to groupthink. But what you said is groupthink can occur in an online setting is very interesting to me, and I think it's very interesting to others too, because as I think Sohyun Bae said, Bae Sohyun, she said about how the post-COVID world is going to be different. More of these interactions will be happening online, so people will be studying, the brain activity, groupthink, all these things as a function of online. So that was very interesting. Thank you. Okay, so let's end now. I'm going to end the recording.